Fate's hand rested heavily on Fiona Anderson's shoulder as she crossed the threshold of the Grand Meridian Hotel, completely unaware that the past was about to collide with her present. Her cream silk gown whispered around her ankles with each step she took toward the charity gala that would change everything. Fiona smoothed her hands down the delicate fabric, grateful for the confidence it gave her. At 32, she had finally built a life she was proud of, successful interior designer with her own small but thriving firm, a cozy apartment in the city, and friends who supported her through everything. Everything except the heartbreak that still occasionally visited her in quiet moments when she allowed herself to remember him. "Name, please?" the hostess asked, tablet in hand. "Fiona Anderson. I should be on the guest list for the Children's Future Foundation Gala," the hostess smiled. "Yes, Miss Anderson, welcome. The event is being held in the grand ballroom just through those doors." Taking a deep breath, Fiona stepped into the glittering ballroom. The charity was close to her heart, supporting education for underprivileged children, and she donated her services to redesign their headquarters last year. The invitation to their annual fundraiser had been unexpected but welcome. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the elegant decor, the crystal chandeliers reflecting light across the gathered crowd of Seattle's elite. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, hoping to calm her nerves. These high society events always made her feel slightly out of place, despite her professional success. Fiona Anderson," a friendly voice called from behind. She turned to find Melissa James, the foundation's director, approaching with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you could make it." Melissa embraced her briefly. "Your work on our offices has been transformative. Everyone comments on how the space inspires them." "That's exactly what I hoped for," Fiona replied, genuine pleasure warming her voice. "Children deserve beautiful spaces that inspire learning." "Well, our CEO is eager to meet you. He's been particularly impressed with your vision." Fiona nodded politely, though her attention had drifted to a tall figure across the room. There was something familiar about the broad shoulders, the way he stood with quiet confidence as he spoke to a small group. Something that made her heart skip traitorously in her chest. "Is that him?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Melissa followed her gaze. "Yes, that's Harrison Taylor. He took over as CEO about 8 months ago and has completely revitalized our fundraising efforts. Come, I'll introduce you. Harrison Taylor." The name echoed through Fiona's mind, sending ripples of memory cascading through her. It couldn't be, not after 8 years. "Not here." But as Melissa led her across the room and the man turned, Fiona found herself staring into the same hazel eyes that had once looked at her with so much love and then so much pain. "Mr. Taylor, I'd like to introduce you to Fiona Anderson, the interior designer who transformed our headquarters." Those eyes widened in recognition, a flash of something surprise, perhaps regret crossing his features before his professional mask slipped back into place. "Miss Anderson," he said, his deep voice sending an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Your work is exceptional. Thank you for your contribution to our cause." Fiona forced herself to breathe normally, to extend her hand as if greeting a stranger rather than the man who had once known every secret corner of her heart. "Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'm passionate about creating spaces that nurture potential." His hand was warm around hers, the brief touch igniting memories she'd fought to bury. Late nights studying together in college, his fingers intertwined with hers, summer afternoons in the park planning futures that never came to be. "Melissa, would you mind if I spoke with Miss Anderson privately for a moment? I'd like to discuss the possibility of her consulting on some of our other facilities." Melissa beamed. "Of course, I'll go check on the auction preparations." As Melissa disappeared into the crowd, an awkward silence settled between them. Harrison looked different, more refined in his tailored tuxedo. His once boyish features matured into those of a commanding, confident man. But the small scar above his eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way his mouth curved slightly higher on the left when he was tense, those remained achingly familiar. "I didn't know you were involved with the foundation," Fiona finally said, struggling to maintain her composure. I joined the board 3 years ago. The CEO position opened unexpectedly when Margaret retired. He paused, studying her face. You look well, Fiona. You too, she replied automatically, though it was an understatement. He looked magnificent, success and maturity having only enhanced what had always been there. Should we move somewhere quieter? Harrison gestured toward the terrace doors. I think we have some catching up to do. Every instinct told Fiona to make an excuse and leave. She had spent years carefully rebuilding herself after their relationship had imploded under the weight of different dreams and ambitions. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, propelled her to nod and follow him onto the terrace. The night air was cool against her bare shoulders. Below them, Seattle's lights twinkled against the darkness of Elliott Bay. It was a view that would normally calm her, but nothing about this moment was normal. So, Harrison began, leaning against the stone balustrade, interior design. You always did have an eye for beauty and detail. It took me a while to find my path after. She trailed off, unwilling to directly reference their breakup. But I love what I do now, and you're running a major foundation. That's impressive. It's meaningful work, he replied. After years in corporate finance, I wanted something more fulfilling. Fiona couldn't help but feel the irony. Their relationship had ended because he'd been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, so certain that success meant wealth and status. She had wanted a creative life to make a difference through design. Their paths had seemed irreconcilably different. What happened to becoming the youngest CFO in your father's company? She asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. Harrison's expression tightened. I did that. Became CFO at 28, just like I planned. Had the corner office, the ridiculous salary, everything I thought I wanted. He looked out over the city, and I was completely miserable. The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken regrets. What changed? Fiona asked quietly. I did. Harrison turned to face her fully. Or maybe I finally stopped running from who I really was. My father had a heart attack 4 years ago. Minor, but enough of a wake-up call for both of us. Made me realize I was living his dream, not mine. Fiona absorbed this, trying to reconcile the ambitious, sometimes ruthlessly determined man she had known with the person standing before her now. I started volunteering with the foundation on weekends, just to have something meaningful in my life. When the opportunity came to lead it full-time, I took a 90% pay cut and never looked back. A waiter appeared with fresh champagne. They each took a glass, using the moment to gather their thoughts. And you, Harrison asked, you achieved your dream. Not right away, Fiona admitted. After I left Seattle, I went to New York, worked for a big firm doing corporate offices, soulless, efficient spaces, exactly what I didn't want to do. What brought you back? My mom got sick 3 years ago. Fiona swirled the champagne in her glass. Breast cancer. She's in remission now, but I came home to be with her through treatment. Started my own firm while I was here, focusing on spaces that make a difference: schools, community centers, healthcare facilities. Harrison's eyes softened with genuine concern. I'm sorry about your mom. I always liked her. She liked you too, Fiona said, surprising herself with the admission. Even after everything, she never had a bad word to say about you. Wise woman, he said with a small smile. I wasn't worthy of that kindness. The honesty in his voice caught Fiona off guard. The Harrison she had known rarely admitted fault. Inside, the orchestra began playing a familiar melody. Through the glass doors, they could see couples moving onto the dance floor. Would you dance with me, Fiona? Harrison asked suddenly. For old time's sake. Every rational thought told her to decline. Dancing meant closeness, and closeness meant danger to the careful walls she'd built. But tonight seemed suspended outside normal time, a strange dream where past and present blurred together. One dance, she agreed, setting down her glass. They moved back into the ballroom, joining the other couples on the floor. Harrison's hand settled respectfully at her waist, keeping a proper distance between them, but even that careful touch sent awareness rippling through her. You remember the first time we danced? He asked, his voice low. How could she forget? Junior year, the winter formal, you were dating Stacy Matthews, but you asked me to dance when she went to the restroom. Harrison laughed softly. I'd been looking for an excuse to talk to you all semester. Sitting behind you in economics, watching you sketch building designs in your notebook instead of taking notes. I got a B- in that class because of you, Fiona accused, but there was no heat in her words. You were very distracting. Worth it, though. His eyes held hers. 2 weeks later, Stacy dumped me because she said I couldn't stop looking at you. You never told me that. Some things seemed better left unsaid at the time. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. I have a lot of regrets about things left unsaid between us, Fiona. The music swelled around them, and Fiona felt herself being drawn closer to him despite her reservations. It would be so easy to fall back into the familiar rhythm they'd once shared, to forget the pain and remember only the good. Harrison, she began, but was interrupted by a tap on his shoulder. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Taylor, but the auction is about to begin and you're needed for the introduction, a young assistant said apologetically. Harrison nodded. Of course. Thank you, Kate, he turned back to Fiona. Duty calls, but please stay, we're not finished catching up. Fiona watched him walk away, conflicted emotions swirling through her. Part of her wanted to grab her purse and leave, to protect herself from reopening old wounds. But another part, the part that had never truly let go, wanted to understand what had changed him, and why fate had brought them back into each other's orbits after all this time. She found her seat for the auction as Harrison took the stage, commanding the room's attention with natural charisma. As he spoke passionately about the Foundation's work, Fiona saw glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with in college, the idealistic side of him that had been overshadowed by ambition and his father's expectations. The auction proceeded, with wealthy patrons bidding generously on donated items and experiences. Fiona had contributed a free design consultation, which sold for an impressive amount to a local restaurateur looking to open a new location. When the formal proceedings concluded, guests began mingling again. Fiona was speaking with a potential client when she felt a presence at her side. I hope I'm not interrupting, Harrison said, but I'd like to show you something if you can spare a few minutes. Curious, Fiona excused herself and followed him out of the ballroom and down a corridor to an elevator. Harrison inserted a key card and pressed the button for the top floor. Where are we going? She asked. You'll see. The elevator opened directly into a stunning penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and bay. But unlike most luxury spaces Fiona had seen, this one felt personal with comfortable furnishings, bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, and artwork that spoke of careful selection rather than designer coordination. Is this yours? She asked, taking in the space, for tonight. I keep it when I'm in Seattle for Foundation business. Harrison moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water. I sold my father's company 2 years ago and used part of the proceeds to establish a trust that funds most of our operating expenses. Allows us to put almost all donations directly into programs. Fiona accepted the water, impressed despite herself. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, it's purpose. He gestured for her to sit on one of the couches. After we broke up, I threw myself into becoming exactly what my father wanted. Made partner faster than anyone in the firm's history, tripled our investments portfolio, lived for nothing but work. He sat across from her, their knees almost touching. And then one day, I was sitting in my office at midnight, and I found myself wondering what you would think of what I'd become. Whether you'd be impressed by the success or disappointed by what I'd sacrificed for it. Fiona's heart beat faster. And what conclusion did you reach? That you would have hated it, that I hated it. He leaned forward. You were right all along, Fiona, about what matters, about finding work that fulfills you, about balance. She swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this now? Because seeing you tonight made me realize I never properly apologized for how things ended between us. His eyes held hers, earnest and direct. I was wrong. I put my ambitions above our relationship, and I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. Fiona set down her water glass, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just you, I was stubborn too, I refused to compromise. You refused to give up your dreams, Harrison corrected. That's not the same thing. A moment of silence stretched between them, years of unspoken thoughts hovering in the air. So, Fiona finally said, you're a completely different person now, just like that, Harrison laughed softly. Not completely different, and definitely not just like that. It's been a long road with plenty of mistakes along the way. I'm still ambitious, still driven, but my goals have changed. My priorities have changed. Fiona stood, needing space to think clearly. She walked to the windows, looking out at the city where they had once been so young and in love. I dated other men after you, she said quietly. Some were kind, some successful, some creative, but none of them were you. She heard him rise, felt him move to stand behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I tried to replace you too, he admitted. It never worked. Fiona turned to face him. What are you saying, Harrison, that after 8 years we should just pick up where we left off? Life doesn't work that way. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm not suggesting we ignore the past or the time we've been apart, but I am asking if you'd be willing to get to know the person I am now. Maybe over dinner next week. The simple request hung between them. Not a dramatic declaration, not a promise of forever, but an invitation to begin again. I don't know if that's a good idea, Fiona said honestly. There's a lot of history between us. History doesn't have to be a bad thing, Harrison countered. It means we already know the worst of each other. We've already seen the flaws and the mistakes. A gentle smile curved his lips. Besides, I've seen your work at the foundation. You've gotten even more talented. I'd like to hear about your process, your inspirations. No pressure, just conversation. Fiona found herself smiling back despite her reservations. You always did know how to negotiate. Is it working? He raised an eyebrow, and for a moment he looked so much like the Harrison of her memories that it made her heart ache. Maybe, she glanced at her watch. I should get back to the gala. People will wonder where we've gone. Harrison nodded, respecting her need for space. Of course. But think about dinner. As they rode the elevator back down, Fiona found herself studying his profile. He had matured in all the ways that mattered, it seemed, while retaining the qualities that had first drawn her to him: his intelligence, his determination, the intensity that made her feel fully seen when he focused on her. The remainder of the gala passed in a blur of conversations and goodbyes. Harrison was pulled into his duties as CEO, and Fiona connected with potential clients and foundation supporters. But their eyes found each other across the room repeatedly, exchanging glances that carried the weight of their shared past and the possibility of something new. At the end of the evening, as Fiona waited for the valet to bring her car, Harrison appeared beside her. Did you drive yourself? He asked. Yes, my practical Honda will look very out of place among all the luxury cars, she joked. I always liked that about you, your practicality. He handed her a business card. My personal number is on the back. About dinner. Fiona took the card, her fingers brushing his. I'll think about it, she promised. Her car arrived, and the valet opened the door for her. As she slid into the driver's seat, Harrison leaned down. For what it's worth, he said quietly, letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life. I don't intend to repeat it. Before she could respond, he closed her door gently and stepped back, giving her a small wave as she drove away. 3 days passed. Fiona threw herself into her work, trying to focus on the restaurant redesign project she'd landed at the gala. But Harrison's card sat on her desk, a constant reminder of choices not yet made. On the 4th day, she was measuring a wall in her client's space when her phone rang. Unknown number. Fiona Anderson, she answered professionally. Miss Anderson, this is Kate from the Children's Future Foundation. Mr. Taylor asked me to call regarding a potential project. Fiona's heart skipped. Oh, what kind of project? We're converting an old warehouse into a community center with after-school programs, and he thought your expertise would be perfect. Would you be available to meet him at the site this afternoon to discuss possibilities? Professional curiosity ward with personal caution. I could stop by around 4, she finally agreed. Perfect. I'll text you the address. At 4:05, Fiona pulled up to an imposing brick warehouse in a neighborhood that had once been industrial but was gradually being revitalized. Harrison stood outside, dressed casually in jeans and a navy sweater that made him look more like the college boy she'd fallen for than the CEO she'd encountered at the gala. "You came," he said, smiling as she approached. "It's a professional consultation," she reminded him, though her racing pulse suggested otherwise. "Of course." He unlocked the heavy metal door. "After you." The interior was vast and empty, with high ceilings, exposed beams, and large windows that needed cleaning but would eventually let in beautiful light. Harrison explained the Foundation's vision as they walked through the space classrooms for tutoring, art studios, a computer lab, a small gymnasium. "The neighborhood kids need a safe place," he said, passion evident in his voice. "Somewhere they can get help with homework, explore creative interests, just be kids without worrying about what's happening on the streets." Fiona found herself caught up in his enthusiasm, already envisioning how the space could be transformed. "You'd need to open up these areas here," she said, gesturing to a wall. "Create better flow, and these windows are amazing once they're cleaned. The natural light will be perfect for art spaces." They moved through the building, bouncing ideas off each other with increasing animation. It felt natural, collaborative, reminiscent of late nights in college when they'd stay up talking about how they would change the world. "You really care about this," Fiona observed as they reached the rooftop, which offered views of downtown Seattle in the distance. "I do." Harrison leaned against the railing. "These kids remind me of myself in some ways. Before the pressure to follow my father's path, before I lost sight of what mattered." "And what does matter?" she asked, watching his profile against the late afternoon light. He turned to her. "Making a difference, creating something meaningful, being true to yourself." His eyes held her steadily. "Not letting fear keep you from taking chances." Fiona recognized the moment for what it was, not just about a building project, but about them, about second chances and roads not taken. "I didn't come prepared to give you a formal proposal today," she said carefully. "I'm not looking for a formal proposal." Harrison took a step closer. "Just an honest answer. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not to talk about the Foundation or this project, just us catching up properly." Fiona took a deep breath. "On one condition." "Name it." "We talk about everything, no holding back, no polite avoidance of difficult subjects. If we're going to do this, even just dinner, I need honesty." Harrison nodded solemnly. "Complete honesty, you have my word." Dinner the next evening began somewhat awkwardly at a quiet restaurant overlooking Lake Union. They ordered wine and appetizers, making small talk about mutual college friends and changes in the city since Fiona had been away. But true to their agreement, once the initial pleasantries were exhausted, they dove into deeper waters. "Why didn't you fight harder for us?" Fiona asked, the question that had haunted her for years finally finding voice. "When I said I needed to pursue my own path, why did you let me go so easily?" Harrison's expression grew somber. "Because I thought I knew better. I was so certain that my way was the right way, that security and financial success had to come first, that your creative ambitions were secondary." He shook his head. "I was arrogant enough to think you'd eventually see things my way, or that I could make enough money to compensate for your sacrifices." He took a sip of wine. "By the time I realized how wrong I was, you were gone. New York, new life, no contact. I thought about calling," Fiona admitted. "So many times, but I was afraid." "Of what?" "That you'd convince me to come back on your terms, or worse, that you wouldn't want me to come back at all." Harrison reached across the table, his fingers gently touching hers. "I would have wanted you back on any terms if I'd known what I know now." "And what's that?" Fiona asked, not pulling her hand away. "That success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. That compromise isn't weakness, that you were the best part of my life, and I was a fool to let pride and ambition cost me that." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, broke through the last of Fiona's defenses. She turned her hand to clasp his properly. "I wasn't perfect either," she said softly. "I could have tried harder to make you understand why my work mattered to me. I could have been more patient." "We were young," Harrison said. We thought we had all the time in the world to figure things out. Their entrees arrived, and they shifted to lighter topics as they ate funny stories from their respective careers, travels they'd enjoyed, books they'd loved. It felt both familiar and new, comfortable yet exciting. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the dark surface of the lake. Harrison's hand found hers again, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "So what happens now?" Fiona asked as they paused to look out over the water. "Now," Harrison said, turning to face her, "I ask if I can see you again, and again after that. I ask for the chance to do better this time around." "And the foundation project," she asked, "was that just an excuse to see me?" "The project is very real and we genuinely need your expertise, but yes, it was also an excuse," he smiled, a touch sheepishly. "I'll understand if you feel there's a conflict of interest." Fiona considered this. "We'd need clear boundaries. Professional is professional, personal is personal." "I can work with that." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "So, is that a yes to seeing me again?" Instead of answering with words, Fiona rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. It was brief, tentative, but it sent electricity coursing through her veins, a reminder of what had always been so right between them, even when everything else had gone wrong. When she pulled back, Harrison's eyes were bright with emotion. "I've missed you," he whispered. "Every day for 8 years." "I've missed you too," Fiona admitted, "even when I didn't want to." Over the weeks that followed, they navigated their renewed relationship carefully. Professional meetings about the community center project during the day, personal dinners and quiet evenings together after hours. They relearned each other's habits and quirks, discovered new interests that had developed during their time apart, and slowly rebuilt the trust that had once been broken. It wasn't always smooth. Old insecurities occasionally surfaced. They argued about the best approach to the community center's budget constraints. Fiona worried that Harrison's workaholic tendencies might re-emerge. Harrison feared Fiona might not fully trust his changed priorities. But each disagreement was followed by honest conversation rather than retreat, by understanding rather than ultimatums. 3 months after the gala that had brought them back together, they stood in the nearly completed community center. Bright colors adorned walls that had once been industrial gray. Comfortable furniture arranged in inviting configurations filled spaces that had been empty. Children's artwork already hung in the corridors. "It's even better than I imagined," Harrison said, his arm around Fiona's waist as they surveyed their joint achievement. "It's going to change lives," Fiona agreed, leaning into his embrace. "These kids will have opportunities I never dreamed of at their age." Harrison turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "You've changed my life too, you know." Again, Fiona smiled up at him. "For the better, I hope. Immeasurably." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Which is why I was hoping you might consider making the arrangement permanent." Before Fiona could process his meaning, Harrison was reaching into his pocket and lowering himself to one knee. "I know it might seem fast after reconnecting," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "But I feel like we've been given a rare second chance and I don't want to waste another day. I've loved you since we were 20 years old, Fiona Anderson. I never stopped, even when I tried to convince myself otherwise." He opened a small velvet box to reveal a ring with a single perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones. "It's not as flashy as what I might have chosen 8 years ago," he said with a small smile. "I've learned that the most beautiful things aren't always the most ostentatious." Fiona's eyes filled with tears as he continued, "Will you marry me? Partner with me in life the way we've partnered on this project, bringing out the best in each other, creating something beautiful together, making a difference in the world around us." "Yes," Fiona answered without hesitation, her heart too full for elaborate speeches. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to pull her into his arms, Fiona felt the pieces of her life clicking perfectly into place. Sometimes, she thought as his lips met hers, the most precious things were those we let go not because they weren't meant to be ours, but because they needed to return to us at exactly the right moment, when both hearts were ready. 6 months later, they married in a simple ceremony on the rooftop of the community center they had created together, surrounded by friends, family, and the children who now benefited from their collaborative vision. And as they exchanged vows against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline, both knew with absolute certainty that their greatest success would always be the love they had lost and found again stronger, wiser, and built to last a lifetime.